Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Living Ageless and Bold. Today, we have Mary Jo West, who is dubbed the First Lady of Television in Phoenix, Arizona. She started her career as the first woman anchor in 1976. And as exciting and groundbreaking as that sounds, there were a lot of challenges that came with that. And we're going to talk about her career, how she got there. She's won multiple awards, Emmy Awards, Peabody, just a storied career in journalism and groundbreaking. So I'm so happy to have you with me today, Mary Jo.
Oh, Christina, I've been so looking forward to this because you are the pro here, and I'm looking forward to your questions. And congratulations on your year anniversary on your podcast.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It's pretty exciting. And I have just been so fortunate and had such an amazing opportunity to interview women like you who have these stories and people might not know about them. And we have this great opportunity just to inspire women our age and younger women who might be trailblazers in a different field like you were. So let's talk about, 1976. I actually Googled it because I wanted to see what happened that year, but Charlie's Angels launched that year.
Yes. Well, before I begin, I'm going to give you some advice because now that you've had your year anniversary, I'm going to play mom to you. Sorry, but you need 2 weeks off because I understand you've interviewed 52 people during this past year, and you need to take care of you. So end of advice.
Oh, you're sweet. The nice thing about a podcast is it's not live, so I can stockpile a little bit.
You can cut that out, though, too.
No. And that's a great piece of advice, though, and I am a bit of a workaholic, but with the podcast, it is nice that I started out ahead of the game. I pre-recorded a lot.
Good.
I am able to take time off, and I've got a vacation coming up, and I won't have to worry about the podcast because it's already recorded.
I'm so proud of you. All right, enough of beep. Okay. I'm taking my mom hat off. There you go.
No, So I want to hear what made you, obviously in the 70s, it was a very male-dominated field. What made you say, that's what I want to do?
I was a music major at Florida State University on a voice scholarship. I grew up in Atlanta, and I was a singer and was hopefully headed for Broadway or Metropolitan Opera. And then my junior year, my sorority kept entering me in these beauty contests. I never won them. I wasn't pretty enough, but I could win the talent and use the scholarship money. So I actually won the Miss Atlanta pageant. That was a preliminary of the Miss America pageant, who at the time, and I think still is, was more focused on more points were given if you did well in the interview and if you did well in talent than how you physically looked. And so I won, but spent that year traveling around the country and going to Washington, D.C. a lot. And I was on the cusp, Christina. This was the 1971. I was on the cusp of where women were supposed to go to college to get their MRS degree and stay home and raise children. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being a mom at home. My gosh. And the women's liberation movement was coming in at that time. So my mind started to open up a bit about my role as a woman. And I decided to change majors and go to the University of Georgia and get a degree in journalism. My parents were horrified. So was my music teacher, everyone. What are you doing? Don't give up your music. It was the right thing to do. And the timing was perfect because the FCC at that time changed the law and said TV stations, local stations must hire minorities and women. So it was great timing.
Wow. Okay. So your first day on the job, you're obviously very attractive, very well-spoken. You come in and I don't think they threw a welcome party for you.
Of course they didn't. And I was terrible because the first thing they threw at me was a Bolex camera. And at University of Georgia, we never had the great experience of using equipment. I was always the anchor on the set. So first I had to learn overnight how to shoot a video story, shoot a film story. And I also was covering South Georgia because Tallahassee, Florida is in North Florida, and then there's South Georgia, and I was covering South Georgia. The males in the newsroom were not very helpful, except one. And it was very, very difficult. But I slowly earned the respect. I did not earn the respect, though, of some of the people I covered, like Sheriff Jewel Futch of Valdosta, Georgia, who was on trial. And at the end of one day, he corners me and says, "Now, you sweet little lady, you're not going to say anything bad about me, are you?" And I was treated like a little girl, so to speak. And I lowered my voice. That my voice you're hearing now was not my natural voice. As a singer, I could learn how to do that. But the early days were not easy at all. But I would not give up. And one quick story. Thomasville, Georgia, where I got my start, Thomasville, Georgia / Tallahassee, Florida TV station they won the local football games, and then they got to go to the state championship in Atlanta. And I was thrilled they asked me to cover it, even though I was a woman. And this was a big deal. And so when I get to the press box in Atlanta, they don't let me in because I'm a woman. And that was horrifying. And I was so angry. And I had to be very, very, very aggressive and assertive and threatened to call the superintendent of Fulton County and said, "I have a right to be here." And then I remember running at the end of the game, Thomasville won, and going to a payphone and calling in the report, but couldn't have done it without being in the press box. So that was just one of many, many stories.
Do you look at women today like Erin Andrews and just say, "I did that for you. Like I started this for you"?
Well, I helped pave her way. I did. And she's done such a tremendous job. And I'm so supportive of other women.
Right. Wow. Okay. So what got you to Arizona?
Well, as I said, my first job was in the Tallahassee, Thomasville, Georgia area. And then I got to a job with WFSU TV. That's the PBS station for FSU, Florida State. And then after 2 years, early on, I got my own woman's show. And then I decided, as what did you call yourself? A serial entrepreneur and as the expert on PR, I really wanted to move up the ladder. So with a 3/4-inch tape under my arm, I got in my car by myself. I was married at the time, drove to 50 TV stations around the country. And I would be in Houston one day, parked over by the freeway, and call the news directors in Dallas and say, "Opening line, I know you don't have any openings, but I would like to come by for 10 minutes and show you my audition tape." And sure enough, I got offered a job in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Phoenix, Arizona.
It's such a tribute to your passion for what you want to do. I went to Virginia Tech, go ACC, but I had the opportunity to interview Hoda Kotb for a Women in Business event. And her story is so similar to what you just said, Mary Jo. She graduated from Virginia Tech and she had her tape. And she went to Roanoke, which is right there. And she knew she was getting hired, and then she didn't get hired. And then she went to Richmond and she didn't get hired. And then she took her mom's car and she went south. As you went across the country, she went down 37 stations until she got to one where the anchor just happened to have just called in sick. And the guy said, if that jacket fits you, the one on the back of her door, you can do the news tonight.
No.
And she was horrible. And then the woman was sick again. So she got another shot the next night. But that's how she started.
She didn't know that.
Drove. Yes. Yeah. I have an interview on my YouTube. Yeah, you can watch it. But same story. So your resilience and your passion and you've got to, this is such an important lesson for everybody listening and watching.
Yes.
You've got to be able to take no and bounce back and how many no's did you say you got? 50?
Well, 48 out of 50.
Okay, so now you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico. How did that go?
Well, actually, we chose to go to Phoenix. I got two job offers, one in
You did
Phoenix
too.
and one in
Okay.
Albuquerque, and went to Phoenix. And the first year, it went so well. I was one of the hosts on a PBS news station. Let me try this again. PBS station that had a nightly news show, and I was one of the three anchors. And it couldn't have gone well. Couldn't have. I can't talk today. I'm sorry. We'll try again. It couldn't have gone better. But my husband couldn't seem to find work in broadcasting. He had been the director of my woman's show in Tallahassee, and so wonderfully, moved out to Phoenix with me and took a job at a record store. And I just felt a year later it was time for him. But right before that was to happen, the big guys on the hill, it was called Channel 10, CBS, Cool News. They
Cool. I
wanted,
saw that. KOOL.
yes, isn't that cool in Phoenix? And they wanted to hire an anchor woman. And one thing led to another, and I got to be a finalist, and then they chose me, and we stayed. So that's how the Phoenix story happened. And that's where all the tough stories happened, because the anchorman, it was like the movie Anchorman. The man that I co-anchored with was not only my boss, but he was twice my age. He was incredibly sexist and racist, and it was a nightmare. He would say things to me seconds before the air. He'd say things like, "What can I do to see your blanks?" or "Let's play hide the weenie in the helicopter." Those kinds of things. But it wasn't just to me; it was to other women in the newsroom. And
And this is 1970s. This is, I don't want to say this
1976.
happened. I mean, we've all seen as Hollywood, big people came crashing down. That's what happened back then.
Well, yes, it was 1976. And Phoenix, as I say in my talks, was one of the last conservative bastions to hold out and not allow women to do the news. This was 76. The women started appearing maybe early 70s, late 60s, a few women, not that many. But here's the bottom line. I decided whatever he said to me, I was not going to leave. I had an inflated sense of self-importance that I felt like I was carrying the women of the world on my back, which I wasn't, but I was not going to give up. So I decided to work harder than any man or woman in the newsroom, and lucked out and had great teamwork there, and won a lot of awards, and got offered a job at Network News in New York with CBS, and decided to win him over as far as his respect goes. And I will tell you, now that I'm 75 years old and have a little bit of wisdom, a lot older and wider, but hopefully older and wiser too, I decided I can see some of his side of it, not being sexist or racist, but he was of a different generation. I'm not defending him, but that's just how men talk to women
I
in
have
the
said that
workplace.
before. Some of them just didn't know any differently. I mean, now we have the internet and social media, and we know this is not
And
appropriate.
with their
And
lawsuits, yeah.
yeah, right. But back then, and there are younger people who were listening, thinking, "Oh my gosh!" But nobody, you didn't know. I mean, you knew it didn't feel right, but there wasn't a lot of precedent. You weren't looking on Instagram and Twitter, finding out this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
It
You're so
was
right. You're so right, Christina. Thank you for that. And so now, in looking back, I decided, though, I did do something smart. I decided to learn from him. Bill was an icon in Arizona. He wore a bolo tie every day. He made the bolo tie the official state tie, but he knew Arizona politics better than anyone in the world. So I learned from him about politics. He made me get rid of my Southern accent. I got rid of my Southern accent. It comes back, of course, when I talk on the phone to my relatives in Atlanta. But I learned from him, even though it was horrible. He was horrible. And I stuck it out for 6 years. But I loved Bill. I just didn't like the way he treated me. So one final story. At the end of his life, he asked his family to have me speak and sing at his funeral. And what was so interesting was the song he personally chose starts out, and I'm not going to sing it, but I'll say it. If I have wounded any soul today, dear Lord, forgive. And the whole song was about forgiveness. And also, Bill had been run over literally by a train when he was 16 and lost both of his legs. So I know in my heart of hearts, he was in pain a lot. Again, that does not excuse him for being a racist or sexist, but I know he was in a lot of pain. He never complained, never. So it's interesting how we can hopefully get some wisdom as we get older.
You do, you find the silver linings. But
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you something I read on your website. So you had Bill, but then this was a quote. You said, one came from a woman in Sun City who said, tell that blonde-headed tomato to go straight home and cook supper for her husband. So how does something like that, and I'm sure she wasn't the only one in the 70s, you said very conservative area. Wow. When you see something like that or hear something like that.
Christina, first, thank you for doing your homework and for reading those articles. That means a lot. Yeah, I use that in my speeches, and I make her sound like this. I say, and then I got this phone call from this lady in Sun City who wrote, tell that blonde-headed tomato to go straight home and cook supper for her husband. Signed, a lady from Sun City. I just saw her in my head. For some reason, I had her having a Texas accent. No offense to Texas. Please don't hang up. Don't stop watching. But I did something unusual. I learned this from Bill Close. He taught me to have a sense of humor. I called that woman. And I said, this is Mary Jo West. And I said, I can't cook supper for my husband because I don't know how to cook. But I will come out to your church and sing if you want me to. And I ended up, all those years singing in about 40 churches in Sun City. But getting back to your original question, I was shocked that women were not supporting me. However, it kept getting better. I'll never forget, my favorite letter came from a woman from Tempe, Arizona. She said, I have a 3-year-old little daughter, and last night she ran up to the TV screen, punched her finger up at it and said, look, Mommy, women can be newsers too. And that just inspired me so. So it took some time, but the women came over to our side.
Well, and I thank women like you. I have a daughter who's 24, who's incredibly confident. She's got a good job. She's confident in her job. I think if a man came up to her and said something, matter of fact, I know that a union person came up to her and she's like, oh, no, we have a contract. Like, you need to do this. It's all right here. But that's because of women like you who taught women like us that we can be strong and we can stand up and we can be in spaces that are predominantly male.
We can, because I would not give up. I would just not give up. But in looking back, I hate to say this, the one thing I would have done differently, instead of going over Bill's head to talk to the boss about his behavior, I would have gone to him directly, but I was afraid to. And what I would have said is, Bill, I know how much you love your wife and your daughters, but how would you feel if someone spoke to them the way you speak to me? I wish I had said that, but I never did. And he finally stopped when the law changed. Right. The law got stronger.
But I was going to say, Mary Jo, too, that probably came to you years later.
It did.
When we have more confidence. And, you're 20, 30 years old. And I had a boss that was, yelled and screamed all the time. And he could be really, really nice. But then I'm like, now I look back, I'm like, you had no right to yell at me like that. I'm a human. I'm a person. I didn't deserve that. But he yelled at his wife that way. And
Bill did not yell at his wife. No, Bill did not yell at his wife. Well, because I could hear them talking on the phone. But you don't know. I work at the airport 3 days a week. Let me give you a quick yelling story.
I saw that. You're volunteering. Tell that. I thought that was great.
I'm behind the information desk at Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix. And if you don't think I don't get yelled at, I do. Airports make people crazy and stressed out. And I'm kind of a social worker. And I will put up with it to a certain point. But when someone is mean to me, I just say, I really want to help you. But I can't if you continue to keep talking to me that way. And if they keep talking to me that way, I take my sign that's on my desk and I put it down and I walk away. I'm not going to put up with it.
No, and nobody deserves it. They
No.
don't. But I want to go back to work because you did some amazing things. Uh, you were the first woman to go into the prison, the local prison, and do a story. I was fascinated by that. Will you share that story?
Of course. In the early 80s in Phoenix, there was a serial rapist, and he was raping people, usually 80 years old or older, the elderly, and it just really was breaking my heart. So I decided to do a four-part series on the news and I called it Rape. One of the reasons, and this is mean, I know, but Bill Close, my co-anchors, we've been talking about, refused to say the word rape on the air. But I thought we needed to hear that word. It's rape. And yes, sexual assault was the other words I used. But I decided, all right, let's educate the women, especially in the audience, about rape. And what is it all about? And then the more I thought, I think I should interview the rapist at Florence Prison because they are the experts on it. And somehow my station gave me permission, and my photographer and I, videographer walked in the prison, and then the prison guard said, "You're on your own," and closed the door. That was very scary. And what I learned, of course, from those men was that rape has nothing to do with sex. It's everything to do about anger, control, and power. And so that series was my first Emmy, and I was so proud of that, and the team that helped me do it. And that's that story.
Wow. And you won several Emmys. You won a Peabody. What's your favorite story that you ever ran?
My favorite was the incredible opportunity of getting to go down the Colorado River in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I called it Take Me to the River, and it was the first time ever the National Park Service opened up the river to allow the disabled, profoundly disabled, to ride in the rafts down the Colorado River. We were on the water 16 days and 15 nights. And I was terrified because I wish I was not an outdoors person. I just, how am I going to go to the bathroom? Poor me, right. We had precious people who were blind and quadriplegics and people dying of cancer. And that was by far my favorite story and turned into a documentary, Take Me to the River. And that was my favorite.
Wow. That's powerful. You said 15 nights and 16 days.
Yes, it was. The disabled had trouble. The only main trouble they had was rolling the wheelchairs onto the sand when we would land, to make camp that night. The river rafters, the guides were just unbelievable. They had never done anything like this. They would lift up these quadriplegics and take them to this beautiful Havasu Falls, and it was a holy experience. It was very spiritual. You can imagine, and so I'll never forget that.
Wow. We have, I interviewed another woman, Lorraine Woodward, of becoming rentable. And what she did, she's in a wheelchair. She has muscular dystrophy, and her two boys do also. And they ended up building a beach home in North Carolina because she could never go anywhere because she couldn't take her wheelchair in the sand. And they built a home accessible. Well, they needed to rent it to pay for it, and it booked out for the entire year. People would drive from California to North Carolina to have an accessible home. So when you said that story, it made me think of that you can't take a wheelchair in the sand.
No, you can't.
We don't realize how fortunate we are to be able to do the things that we do.
Yes, to be able-bodied. Absolutely. And at the end of that trip, the bonding, you can't even imagine. And as you look around the circle of the people you're with, you don't see a person who's blind. You see a person. Right. Their disability disappears, thank God. And
wow. So what did you do after Arizona? Did you move to New York?
Moved to New York, and that experience was fascinating because I could put on my resume that I made it to network. but it did not turn out. It did not turn out well. Not that I wasn't good at what I did. I was an anchor on the pioneer all-night newscast CBS started called Night Watch. And it was to compete with that upstart Ted Turner, who thought that he could make 24-hour news. And, the rest is history. Something that we may not have time to talk about a lot today, but I was coming off a horrible, horrible, horrible time with clinical depression. But nobody, when I was you didn't see it in my work, but I felt it, of course. And so when you are on the air from 2 to 6 a.m., I don't know if you've ever worked those shifts, the overnight shift, but it does terrible things to your circadian rhythm and to your body. And so I stayed a year before I had the opportunity when the ABC affiliate in Phoenix said, please come home, Mary Jo. And I went back home and was the managing editor and chief anchor at the ABC affiliate in Phoenix. And this is where things get really dark, because 3 years into that experience, and I won more awards, but the ratings did not go up. It's very hard if you're a local anchor to leave, go to another city, and come back. And so I was competing against the great Channel 10 on the Hill. But to make a long story short, they let me go. But out of that came the most amazing story. I had the opportunity to adopt a baby that Mother Teresa gave me when I did a documentary on her on my own, so with the Catholic Church too. And so I adopted a baby from her orphanage in Honduras that she literally gave me. And that baby today is 36 years old. I have 3 grandchildren. So when I give my talks, I talk about taking a crisis and turning it into an opportunity. I had never lost a job in my life, but out of that came the privilege to spend time with Mother Teresa and then for her to give us a baby.
Wow. We talk a lot about this on the podcast, whether you call it a failure, a pivot, whatever that may be, however you want to term it, but we have to experience those things in our life to move forward.
Yes.
If everything were sunshine and roses,
we couldn't appreciate that.
You couldn't. No,
and
as hard as it is, and as dark as it is, that you found your beautiful baby. That's amazing.
I know. Her name is Molly, Mother Teresa, named after Mother Teresa, but we call her Molly.
Wow. And what a story she has to tell.
She does.
Literally.
She does.
I was given to my family by Mother Teresa.
Yes. And we're still trying to find her birth mother, and maybe someday we will, or birth parents.
Wow. And this led you have done a lot of work. And again, we don't have a lot of time, but I know you're very passionate about your work with mental health.
Absolutely. I was on Oprah Winfrey. She interviewed me about my situation. At the height of my anchor career, they sent me to cover the Democratic and Republican national conventions. And during that time, in order to say yes, and this is another thing we women were trying, including me, early on, we didn't want to mess up. So I said yes to everything they asked me to do. In order to do everything they asked me to do, which included TV and radio news reports, I did not sleep for 5 days, literally. Did not put my head on the pillow because of the time differences. And I came back and I went into mania. I'd had clinical depression all my life, had not really even realized it until a diagnosis, but then the mania kicked in. And then the clinical depression came back tenfold, and I couldn't do anything. And so the station stood by me, and they sent me to the best psychiatrist in Arizona. I went to Camelback Hospital, one of the best hospitals in the country for psychiatry. And back in 81, they didn't have the drugs. Fortunately, we have wonderful medications today. And I know some people are anti-medication, saved my life. But bottom line is I had a series of 3 shock treatments, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. Supposed to have 12, but they gave me 3. 2 weeks later, I'm back on the air anchoring. And a year later, I'm in New York City at CBS News. So I know a lot about mental health and mental illness. And to this day, one of my ministries is to meet with anybody, to talk to them and give them hope. I just have a broken brain. And every day I take 2 pills that get the serotonin to where it's supposed to be in my brain. And I'm myself. I'm not anybody else. It gave me back. It gave me the light back. So I want to encourage anyone listening or watching this to know that there is hope and help, and you don't have to live in that horrible, horrible darkness. Winston Churchill called it his black dog. So many famous people and obviously unfamous people have this horrible mental illness, and please get help.
Well, and I'm so thankful now. Maybe it was COVID that just really brought it to the forefront where
Again, yes, thank God.
It's okay to say it. It's you just gave us your heart and soul. And, I think back in the 70s, you never would have done that.
No,
Nobody would have done that.
It was a
Right.
secret. And the station protected me. No one knew. And but it was a stigma. You didn't talk about it. And I even
Right.
use humor. I say when I went to CBS News in an interview with Dan Rather, I wasn't going to say, well, let's see, Dan, I'm a great reporter. I'm a good writer. I had shock treatments and I'm good with people. You don't bring it up. You don't bring it up. So, but it's gotten better. I've testified to the legislature here in Arizona, was invited to the White House to speak at their mental health conference. I'm very blessed to share my story.
Oh, Mary Jo, you're amazing. I could talk to you for another hour.
I could talk to you, my dear. I didn't get to
goodness.
ask you. I didn't get to interview you like your last podcast. When Joe
Maybe
interviewed you.
for the 2-year anniversary, I'll reach back out to you. So I wrap up every episode. I ask my guests the same questions. What is the greatest thing you've accomplished since you turned 50?
Since I turned 50?
Yeah.
Well, of course, I can't pick one. It had to be one, being a mother. And two, spending each moment with gratitude.
I love that. I love that. And where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Well, if I'm alive, I'm 75. I see myself doing the same thing I'm doing today. Mother Teresa always said she wanted to die on her feet. I want to die on my feet. I want to go back to Kenya, where we're helping to take care of some orphans with HIV, which I'm going to do in a few months again. And I want to die on my feet.
Oh, Mary Jo West, thank you so much. You truly, what a great interview. Thank you for joining me.
And you're a great interviewer. Bye, my dear.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.